And so we are just going to start right off. The panel we have here is Satinder Purewal next to me, who's the co-chair of the EGRM Technical Advisory Group. We have Stanislav Lytvyniuk, I can't say that right, I apologize, who's deputy chairman or non-metallic and solid combustible minerals, State Commission of Ukraine on Mineral Resources. We have King Lee, chair of the EGRM Nuclear Fuel Resources Working Group and the World Nuclear Association. And we have Newton Kodhelaj. Yeah, I'm also not saying that right, apologies. Polytechnical University of Tirana, Albania. And with that, let's get started. And I think we start with you, Surendra.
Well, thank you very much, Karen. Really appreciate it. Great to be here. After 3+ years of absence in person, it's wonderful to see everybody back. Just to set the scene, before I start on the slides, I've got about 22 slides, but most of them I'll flick through fairly quickly. Just want to cover what normally TAG presents a review of what's been done over the previous 12 months. So it's usually every April. Last April, we didn't have a face-to-face session. In fact, EGRM was postponed. So the EGRM 13 was held in October. So what I'm going to be presenting is essentially what's been done over the last 6 months, which when you look at the slide, you'll appreciate the amount of time and effort that's been committed by the work groups, and what's been achieved is phenomenal. But just to cover what was done over the last 2 or 3 years very quickly, we haven't been dormant. TAG has been very proactive and achieved a lot, despite all the challenges of COVID and, of course, geopolitical situation in the last 12 months or so. And last year, specifically, I think we looked at what we wanted to present to the EGRM, a kind of a realignment of EGRM, the Bureau, and TAG. And this was discussed at great length internally. And in fact, we had a face-to-face meeting here, just by a few folks in April. And then this was presented at EGRM 13 in October. However, in Q4 2022, this realignment was postponed due to various reasons. So it's put on ice. And although it was agreed by TAG and Bureau that there was great merit in moving it forward. So we will resurrect it in the future because it has great merits in implementing it at the right time. So here we are. So I'm going to just cover last 6 months, the report from TAG. This is the outline, and the outline shows that what the vision and mission and the mandated purpose of technical advisory group is, how we are structured, and who are the members. And then I'll very quickly go through some of the work group activities. And then we want to present to you kind of a forward roadmap, the timelines, what we want to do in the future, and finish off with some conclusions. You look at the vision of TAG, and what we see this as a premier technical resource expertise repository for UNFC and UNRMS, with the primary goal of achieving sustainable development goals through implementation of these 2 key documents globally as a total resource classification and management system and can be used by interested entities to make policy and business decisions on energy. And how we're going to do that mission is to proactively work with work groups, Bureau, country stakeholders, and develop UNFC petroleum specifications and guidelines, and conduct pilot studies, hold workshops, and promote global uptake of UNFC and UNRM interested parties. And I should say that it's not just petroleum. It's, of course, we're looking at all commodities and all the other work groups, entity elements that they work on, which we'll go through in a moment. And the idea is to provide advice on the realization of sustainable development goals by using the tools, the two key tools that we've been talking about. So what's our purpose? We advise the Bureau and provide technical support to stakeholders using the two key tools, and develop and maintain sector-specific documents and guidance for UNFC. And we provide assistance and engage with stakeholders how to apply and also map to UNFC. And we review and evaluate progress and delivery against work plan. And we provide special attention to social and environmental aspects and alignment to SDGs. And we've updated the tag terms of reference, which you will be able to see in due course on the website. We coordinate and support the commodity working groups, review draft EGRC documents, and recommend to the Bureau. Receive and assign requests for assistance and advice from stakeholders, and monitor and support work group projects and facilitate cross-group collaboration. This is you may not be able to read this, but when you have access to the slide pack, you should be able to see it. The writing is a little small, but this is the tag structure. On the left, you got EGRM, which is the overall governing entity, if you will. Next comes the Bureau, and then we have TAG. And TAG comprises around 13 work groups. And they're listed in alphabetical order, except I put the renewables right at the top for obvious reasons, because of its great importance. And the renewables comprises or split up into 5 subgroups. And so all of these work groups, they concentrate on specific elements. So for example, anthropogenic resources, they look at anthropogenic resources, as the name says. And you have petroleum, you have minerals, you have nuclear, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't want to go through all of them. I think the list is there. However, I think you'll see on the next slide, the membership, and that also lists the names of each of the work groups. So we have 2 co-chairs, myself and Alex. I believe he's at the back. And then we have the work group chairs, who are all members of TAG. And they, and we have regular meetings. Well, obviously, unfortunately, I'd say, due to issues I mentioned earlier, the last 3.5 years, we could not have regular meetings, but we tried. But we have started again regular meetings the last 6 months at least, and we're back to almost situation normal. And each of the work group chairs are listed, and we have great capture of global representation from North America to all the way down to Australia, and of course, strong representation from Europe. I don't want to go through all the names, but they're there for your reading when you look at the slide pack. Now I'll quickly go through the updates by each work group. The first one, renewables. They work on several segments, the geothermal, hydro, and they look at case studies. They've done a lot of case studies, and we just need to update some of their documents to align with UNFC 2019. And we will be doing that in the coming 12 months or so. They've attended a lot of events, as noted below. Anthropogenic work group, Ulrich Kral he's sitting at the back. He's already covered, I believe, in some detail what they do, and they've achieved a lot. They produce this document, as you can see, and also attended lots of events, as noted on this slide. Commercial work group, they have been working very proactively with lots of segments, including IFRS, ISSB, and they're coming up with lots of new ideas about how we're going to move forward in terms of standardization, and they're very proactively engaged with everyone, including ensuring sustainability of financial standards. Competency work group, they produce guidance note and estimation of classification and management of resources. And this has been published, and they attended a number of events, as noted here. Groundwater work group, another very proactive work group, and the chairperson is here in the audience. They've done a lot of work, and they're looking at the supplemental specifications for groundwater resources, and it's under further development. And we hope that it will be completed and submitted within the next 12 months, if not earlier. And they've been very proactive in attending lots of events as well. And I think it's they're to be congratulated on the work that's been achieved, especially since Peter has taken over as chair from Kevin, who's based in Canada. So we needed somebody in the, if you like, the local time zone in order to ensure we achieve results quickly. Injection work group, they're working on the draft specifications, alignment with the UNFC 2019. It's still under development, and I hope it'll be finished pretty soon. And they've also been quite proactive in attending a number of events related to injection projects. Minerals work group, and I think you heard a little bit already from the co-chair of the minerals work group yesterday, and Hendrik Falk, he's based in the Northwest Territories in Canada, and he's attended a number of events, as you can see, and they're also working on alignment with Crisco at UNFC. And there's a case study that is published, this titanium deposit, which is available for you to access. Nuclear work group, King Lee is here on the table. I think he's going to cover some of this, so I'm not going to say too much. He's been very active developing documents as well as attending events, and it's a very, very active work group as well. Petroleum work group, it's under Barbara Purewal, based in Australia, and they produced these number of documents, including the bridging document on petroleum resources, resource management system, and the UNFC, and also the bridging document between the oil and gas reserves and the Russian Federation. They will, and also Alex attended the events. SDG delivery work group, I won't say too much on this because Julian already covered this at great length wonderfully yesterday. Social and environmental work group, very active group. Again, chair is based in Canada, in Calgary. They do attend a lot of events and generated a lot of documents. Last but not least, social and environmental, women in resource management work group. There's a publication you can see from last year, and that's very important. And then they've been attending a number of events as well, which are very important for women in resource management and promotion of women in resource management. A couple of other documents to be highlighted here. There's two drafts, draft hydrogen concept note, and this should be available to you. And this is, I was going to ask a question earlier when Dr. Reamer posed the question about hydrogen. This is available, and we're working closely with the gas expert group as well. And the CBM cobalt methane classification note is also available. I'm going to quickly go through the roadmap. What are the future updates and timelines? We want to create consistent and clear updates, including timelines for UNFC, UNRMS, specification, and other related documents. This will provide advanced planning of activities. And what are we going to do? So for UNFC, we'll update every 7 years. Last update 2019, next in 2026. So update will 1 year initiate to begin the year and complete by April 2027. So in other words, ready by EGRM 2027. So UNRMS timeline as UNFC, and the specifications documents, same year after UNFC update has been approved, i.e. just after EGRM 2027. And then the bridging documents, these should be updated on an ad hoc basis depending on timing and other updates, including the various societies, including RF 2013 and also the Chinese system. And the guidelines, these should be updated alongside the specifications. Just key points. UNFC, it doesn't need major revisions. It's been reviewed so many times and agreed by stakeholders. It's been approved by many countries and should only need minor updates in future, primarily to ensure consistency with other classification systems and any other changes deemed appropriate to the E-axis. And intelligence, we need to track other commodity categorizations, updated by work groups such as petroleum for PRMS, update by SPE, and minerals updates by CRISCO. And the track the ESG requirements and standards being introduced. Next 2 to 5 years, the key focus will be on case studies. That's a very major focus. And ICE, these setup of these needs to be vigorously pursued with an enlightened global vision. And it's already started, as you know, and we need to expand that considerably. But of course, financing is the key. Okay. And then streamline, work group stream should be streamlined to ensure alignment with clear terms of reference, objectives, and output consistent across work groups. Conclusions. TAG is a very productive year, I should say 6 months, and we've got a large publication list. Work groups are very proactive and a lot of interest globally on UNFCA, UNRMS, and we will look at future updates of UNRMS bridging documents as outlined in the forward plan. And work group chairs and work group members are thanked for their valiant efforts to support TAG's collective objective of UNFC, UNRMS update globally. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Surinder. And we're just going to race on here. And I think there was a lot of information in there, and there's probably going to be a lot of questions, but we may have to push some of those into the lunch break. Now we go to Stanislav on Ukraine's critical raw material strategy, a case on sustainable resource management. Go ahead, Stanislav.
Thank you, Karin. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. 2 days ago, one speaker says time is very important. That is why I would like to present you a brief overview of Ukrainian opportunities in the sphere of critical rough materials. Some aspects, their assessment and reporting and accounting. As it has been rapidly mentioned in Ukraine, the assessment methodology and basic principle of resource formation and management correspond to the UNECE and have been implemented since 1997. In 2018, Ukraine adopted the update classification of mineral reserves and resource aligned with UNECE. Considering the approaches implemented at the national level, the UNECE basic principles are applied and reflect in different areas of resource management system, from initial stage of study to the final accounting and reporting by the state balance. Based on previous studies and obtained geological information, case study projects have been developed and implemented in cooperation with UNECE and also a regular program of technical cooperation. Projects include the assessment of critical rough materials resource potential of Ukraine following the UNECE. Considering the UNECE approach, around 140 deposits have been developed. The list includes mineral areas that are accounted for by the state balance of mineral reserves of Ukraine, following the procedure established by legislation of Ukraine. Corresponding UNECE classes of objects have been established during analytic studies. Some objects, such as the titanium, graphite, silicon, vanadium, zircon, beryllium, lithium, are viable project or potential viable project. Another objects belongs to prospective projects. Follow on, in 2023, after conducting research and holding expert consultation, the Cabinet of Ministry of Ukraine approved the first list of mineral areas of strategic significance for the sustainable development of the economy and the state defense capabilities. These areas will be made available for use through tenders for production sharing agreements. The list includes 26 deposits in total. Most of them is titanium and uranium. And in conclusion, I would like to note the practical implementation of the UNECE, considering the fundamental criteria such as environmental, social, economic viability, technology, technical feasibility, and degree of confidence in the estimate, allows building effective resource management strategies in the future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Stanislav. That was short but to the point. We will now move on to Newton. Kodhelaj. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, madam. Just to clarify, my name is not Newton, although I prefer to be like this, it's Nevton. But I'm used with this in the past 50 years, everybody did this mistake. You are
Nevton.
comparing with a very distinguished person, but I consider myself as I'm very modest one, a better version of him, because I'm able to use a mobile. He was not, only because of this. So let's go. I'm coming from a very small country located in the southwestern Balkan, less than 29,000 square kilometers, around 4.5 million inhabitants registered in the books, because actually we are living only 2.4 million, because the living standards are not the best. The immigration has been horrible owned for the country in the last 32 years. Although a small country, we can consider ourselves as relatively rich with natural resources, starting from the fossil fuels and ending to the renewable ones. As I said, we are part of the southwestern Balkans. Means that we are in proximity of the subduction of the African plate with the Euro-Asiatic one, which creates also some good possibilities to have a positive geothermal regime in the country. You can see in this map the whole territory of Albania and the geothermal map of the country. On the northeast is the first geothermal zone, Peshkopia, where you can find some natural resources. In the center of Albania is the most important one, the Kruja geothermal zone, and then in the western part, in the Peri-Adriatic depression, we can find the third and the last one, which is Ardenica geothermal zone. This division is done based on the geological and hydrogeological features of each one of the zones. These three zones are created the possibility to have geothermal fluids manifestation in Albania. In total, 12 natural resources. Only one of them is steam spring, but unfortunately, we don't have any engineering data for these springs because of the lack of financial capacities to make any in-depth study. And also we have 10 geothermal wells. Frankly speaking, none of these wells had been to explore the geothermal fluids. All of them had been drilled before 1990 in order to explore oil and gas, and it was considered by at that time of communism, as a horrible accident, the blowout of the hot brine. What we did with these fluids? Nothing. We start the first use for biological purposes, SPA, since 2,000 years ago, the time of Roman Empire. And in the last 2,000 years, we slept over this. We are throwing in the creeks a lot of money, typical for poor countries as Albania is. It's not only this, we are creating some very serious health damages to the community, because most of these resources are located in the middle of the settlements, and also causing a horrible environmental impact in the air due to the silica and the calcite depositions. Therefore, it's imperative for the country to follow the UNFC and UNRMS guidelines to develop the adequate geological models regarding the geothermal aquifers, to conduct extensive studies to evaluate their possible further development. The Asia studies and the extensive public consultation with stakeholders should be considered as crucial for the socioeconomic viability of the project. We would recommend to start with the Lija Elbasan hot springs located in the Kruja geothermal zone, Kozani 8, which is located in the same zone, and Banja, which is also part of the same zone. We consider very necessary to think about the geothermal usage also for the heating of the Koch and Tirana University campus. In this case, we are not counting on the geothermal fluids, but on the soil temperature, in order to prove that yes, also in our country it's possible to find or to get any benefit from the soil temperature. Due to the facts and the data that we had been able to gather in the past 25 or 26 years, we can conclude that all the geothermal projects in Albania could be classified as E2, F2, and G2. Finally, the location, stakeholders' engagement, technical data, land property, rights and issues, proximity with the capital of Tirana, and economic analysis shows that the best location to start with the pilot implementation of the geothermal direct utilization in Albania should be Kozani geothermal well. These studies The pre-feasibility and feasibility study shall prove without any doubt that despite the unfavorable geothermal regime under the latest development of the energy sector, the last year we achieved prices of 600 megawatt, 600 euros per megawatt, which was really horrible, unthinkable. These immense resources should be considered as fully competitive and shall support the entire country's sustainable development. Before thanking everybody, I hope that you are going to allow me to thank in particular Mr. Harry Tulsidas and Mr. Oleg Zubinski. I don't think that Oleg is present here because for their restless support. Oh, yes. Thank you, Oleg. So thank you, everybody. I hope that I was short as I promised.
Thank you, Nevton. Am I saying it right now? I'm not lucky with my names today. Apologies for that, but thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. That brings us to the final presentation in this session, and we can have some discussion. I think we'll have time for that. King Lee, the chair of the EGRM Nuclear Fuel Resources Working Group, will give us an update on exploring synergies between uranium, thorium, and rare earth elements. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I can provide you some updates of some of the work of the Nuclear Fuel Working Group. In particular, I think we'll lead on from what Dario said on the Nuclear Fuel Working Group have been supporting some of the other activities, particularly with the clean electricity expert group on the carbon neutrality project. I'll provide some updates, particularly focusing on particular two aspects on the potential demand for nuclear fuel, uranium, and also regarding sustainability of the mining and nuclear energy aspects. So in terms of I'm also from the World Nuclear Association. So we produce a nuclear fuel report that provide data on nuclear fuel and uranium demand and supply. And we produce that with our members. We provide a range of different scenario, upper, lower case based on existing policy. So this describe the current uranium supplied capacity, both in terms of the manufacturing process to convert that into nuclear fuel. This is the current report, and that was issued in 2021. So you can see the report provide three scenarios, an upper case, a reference case, and a low case. But this is based on that outlook approach, based on existing policy, and project forward up to 2040, what are the likely demand for nuclear energy and therefore uranium. And we're currently working on the 2023 report, which will be published later. So for the reference case, effectively, roughly anticipate by 2040, there's going to be a 50% increase in nuclear energy globally. So what's this impact on uranium? So this is based on the reference case. So the current, the thick dark blue chart is effectively the current uranium supply for mining. So you can see there's a current shortfall in that, even in the current time. So that's been met by commercial inventory. But if you project forward, even with the reference case, there's a significant shortfall in from the current mining mines activities. So even based on current projection, new uranium mining will be required. However, that's based on current existing policies and demand. As we know, the world is aimed to get to carbon neutrality and net zero. So as part of our work, we supported the UNECE carbon neutrality project, looking at pathways to net zero, with involving all technology, renewable, CCUS, nuclear and hydrogen, with a particular focus on CCUS, nuclear and hydrogen. Quickly, why we did this? Current model doesn't include new nuclear technology, particularly SMR. So this was a particular missing piece. So part of the modeling work also looked at large reactors and SMR, and also the potential benefit of SMR in terms of not only providing electricity generation, but providing district heating, high temperature process heat for industrial application, and also producing hydrogen from high temperature heat using solid oxide. The results from the carbon neutrality, looking at the carbon innovation case, for electricity generation, nuclear energy is predicted to nearly more than treble, providing 28% of the supply, and nuclear electricity capacity increased to 874 gigawatts, and roughly about half of that is from SMR. So this indicates, in addition to what being done by the World Nuclear Association based on existing policy, this could be even greater demand on nuclear energy and uranium. This is a pathway, but it just provides some kind of insight onto potential demand. The other thing the project also worked on, which Dario highlighted is important, is taking a whole life cycle assessment approach. The project performed life cycle assessment of a whole range of electricity generating sources, CCUS, involving coal, natural gas, hydropower, various different solar technology, concentrated solar technology, and PV, nuclear and wind, involving the whole life cycle, but also across 19 environmental impact category. And I'll just give you some results, main set of results. On greenhouse gas emission, you can see it provides a whole variation. In this case, nuclear have the lowest greenhouse gas emission. And more importantly, there are two broad summarized of context on the impact to human health. Nuclear have similar level to renewable energy, and impact on the ecosystem. Again, you see most sort of significant impact even with fossil fuel with CCUS, but for nuclear, similar to with other low renewable system technology. Why is this important? The UNECE information from this project have contributed to the nuclear energy sustainability discussion as part of the EU taxonomy, and is in fact is referenced in the EU taxonomy delegated act for nuclear and gas. And this current ongoing discussion regarding uranium inclusion within the mining economic activities as part of the EU taxonomy. So the work of UNECE in terms of does have a particularly direct impact on defining sustainability in terms of particular technology. What we're also working on is providing best industrial practice for uranium and mining. The association have developed a industrial best practice for uranium mining from a sustainability end. We have also developed and used by industry for a supplier assessment toolkit. So we're currently updating this assessment toolkit in light of UNRMS and other regulations and standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the speakers. We do have a few minutes for discussion and or questions if we have anything from the floor. Yes, we have El Salvador. And over here afterwards. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm from El Salvador. I work in a geothermal company of Hanghoj. And we started using or implementing UNFC classification for geothermal from the reconnaissance phase to the exploitation stage. Now, El Salvador and Costa Rica were the first one to use this with the help of BGR and GIZ. So we wanted to implement it to the other Central American countries. But I just want to ask if there is somebody who accredits and checks if our classification is correct, because we are doing it just on our own.
Yeah, go ahead, Satinder, and then maybe Nevton wants to comment as well.
Oh, okay. From the technical advisory group perspective, I think we can look at it. We can get the geothermal group to look at it, but it's not something that we do formally. It's like the petroleum work group. We look at all the kind of the developed case studies along with the kind of a partnership with various nations. We've done it for many countries, and it's the same with yourselves. I think if you want someone to look at what you've done, that can be looked at by the geothermal group. So please, we can talk after this session.
Excellent. Any advice from Nevton?
Thank you. For the moment, as I mentioned before, for the moment in Albania, we have only this classification that I said. We split the whole territory of the country in 3 different geothermal zones. That's it. We did nothing else. So the first step that we should do, or the first real serious job that was done, was the report that was prepared along the preparation for this conference. I'm pretty confident that the new UNFC and UNRMS can provide any tool that we can share with the Albanian authority in order to allow them or to knock to their door and tell that, yes, we have also some potential for the geothermal, and you should consider this as well. We do not pretend. I never dreamed about this. I'm a petroleum engineer by the basic education, that the geothermal energy is going to resolve the problems in Albania. No, there is no chance about this. Also, for the reason that we have only geothermal resources of the lower limit of the middle enthalpy, so we cannot produce directly the energy. But including also the geothermal in the entire puzzle, for sure we can facilitate and creating some independence to the energy system of the country. Therefore, and using also this UNFC and UNRMS standards, I hope that we will be able to get some investments. Without investment, it's not possible at all to develop the sector.
Thank you very much for that. I think Uganda had a question.
Thank you. This question goes to Satinder. I just need some clarity. You talked about developing the bridging documents for other systems for countries that are using perhaps SPE and CRISCO. Is this is this the development of these documents? Will this be done by the associations or organizations of these systems, or is it the tag team that will develop to bridge that gap between these systems? Thank you.
Very good question. There's the tag teams or work groups that actually work on the bridging documents. For example, for PRMS, it'll be the bridging document PRMS and UNFC. It'll be the petroleum work group. But we also engage with SPE to ensure that they are aware of what we're doing. So in other words, it's a kind of a closing the loop, closing the circle with them to make sure that they're on board what we're doing. And the same goes for Crisco. It'll be the minerals working group who will be developing the bridging document. And again, we'll make sure that Crisco is on board of what we're doing. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions from the floor? Yes, one more question, and then we'll go to the summary. Go ahead.
All right. My name is Mateus Dakota from Timor-Leste. Now, this is a general question. Noting that the classifications, the application of the UNFC guidelines, let's say, for example, from the government side, they actually use to classify certain resources reserve. Now, when it comes to the acceptance from the industry, because that's actually whatever you're classified will actually give you confidence and give the industry confidence that they want to invest. Now, looking at the reality that we'll say that industries, they have different terms. And even like every countries, they have differences. How can this actually being acceptable globally or specifically to the industry, so actually giving them confidence that whatever the classification you make can give a confidence to the industry that they can come and invest. I think something along the line that from our colleagues from the El Salvador actually were just mentioning. Thank you.
Well, I believe that question's aimed at me. Just to give you an example, a few years back, we did a pilot study in Mexico, over 70 projects, and we classified along with the CNH and ASEAN and various other bodies and government bodies. And these were classified using UNFC. As you may be aware, Mexico uses PRMS, Pemex uses PRMS. So we have a bridging document which basically covers one-on-one PRMS to UNFC, and you can cross-check. Now, going back to your question, it's a chicken and egg situation. How do you sell it? PRMS has been around quite a long time, and it's being used by industry and as well as various other entities. So I think we have a lot of catch up to do, make sure that people are comfortable with UNFC and UNRMS. Okay, thank you.
We are now starting session 3, mapping our resources. And I will be your chair and moderator for this session. I already announced that we split it into 2, but no break. It's just for the sake of organization. And I will ask our speakers to keep the time because it's a very full session. So we'll start by hearing Mike McCurdy, Managing Director of Energy Advisory Services in ICF International, and he will talk to us about the future of hydrogen as a resource and talking about scenario strengths and risks. Please, Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me on the, okay. Yeah, so Mike McCurdy is, so just talk a little bit about hydrogen here. So I work in the diligence business. So we end up doing technical, financial, and market diligence for hydrogen projects. So we're very involved in the financing of a number of different projects globally. And I also have done some work with the Bioenergy Working Group and Renewable Energy Working Group on the UNFC. So hydrogen's a really hot topic right now. We're really seeing global interest in hydrogen. It's really being driven by three really environmentally and social issues. You've got energy security, you've got jobs and community development, and you've got climate issues. And most every country around the world has one, two, or all three of these issues that it's part of their concern. So hydrogen's emerging as a significant way to get substantial greenhouse gas reductions and do it locally. So it's really driving a lot of the social and environmental viability that we use on the E-axis. And the other thing that's going on is there's massive quantities of hydrogen that's required. When we model out some of the different countries, you've got hydrogen in the power sector for long duration storage. That's kind of more aligned with our existing work in fossil resources. There's power sector, on-road, air transport, water transport, industrial uses. So there's just tremendous quantities that are going to have to be classified and quantified. So what we're seeing of late is really government stepping in with significant incentive packages or contracts for difference and other issues to really start moving hydrogen from those E3 categories, kind of good idea, but not economically viable, into a scenario where we're really economically viable. And what the key thing there is getting the initial projects built, and then particularly with electrolyzers, as you start doubling your capacity, you start reducing the cost of those units. They call it the learning curve. So we've seen this in solar, wind, other technologies. So the more you build, the better you get at it, and the prices come down. And so when you start taking a look at electrolyzers, and you look at other solar technologies is a great example of the inverters. We're likely to see very, very substantial reductions here in the next number of years. So by the 2030s, hydrogen's competitive with incumbent fuels, and that's why we're getting to the E1.2. So plotting that, I lost my dollars per gig, but so plotting that electrolyzer cost against diesel fuel, natural gas, and hydrogen through a fuel cell electric vehicle. The prices of these items are the prices of the technology is coming down sufficiently so that we'll see hydrogen be more cost effective as a fuel than diesel by 2025. We're looking at having price parity with natural gas in 2030 or so. And, basically across the world, you're starting to see different, everyone crosses that threshold at a different time, but we've got very, very big volumes coming in. And then we'll see these projects really moving from E1.2 to E1.1. They stand on their own without any government subsidy. And so part of this, they've got the cost curve, but then there's the value curve. And what we're seeing here is that when you look into these various hydrogen markets, you're actually stacking a number of different revenue streams for these projects. You've got the This is a stack in California in the United States, but you've got tax credits. You've got the physical fuel, the value of that fuel that you're displacing. And if you go into a fuel cell electric vehicle, you can get about twice as far as you can with a gallon of diesel. So you can charge twice as much for a kilogram of hydrogen than you can for a gallon of diesel. And then you also get value via CO2 reductions. California's got a program called the Low Carbon Fuel Standard. EU's got the ETS, United Kingdom's. These programs are kind of evolving throughout the world. So with that background, hydrogen is really going to be a complex topic for the UNFC, because what the private sector is doing is bundling the different technologies. So as an example, private parties are blending 90% fossil natural gas, 10% renewable natural gas, and using carbon capture and sequestration, and they can make zero carbon hydrogen. But when we start looking at our different specifications, we've got our gas specifications, we've got biomass, we've got injection. So how we're going to work all those three specifications together, and we're seeing it across the different hydrogen production technologies, electrolyzers. What we see is the developers build up as much renewable supply as they can. So they're combining a solar project, wind project, battery storage, and grid connection. So that because you can get to about 60% capacity factor using the renewables, and then you have to use the grid. So, once again, we're solar, wind specification, and then how we deal with the grid to get to zero carbon electricity. And then the nuclear and solar is another one that we're seeing. So they run the nuclear plant at night, and then during the day when all the renewables come on, they switch to making hydrogen. And so once again, we're crossing specifications. So we're going to have to learn how to blend our different specifications together. And the other thing that's it's a major importance for hydrogen is life cycle. So these projects can get their social contracts to operate environmental. Most of them have to get to zero carbon. And so they're doing it by balancing these different resources. And so the specifications are going to have to figure out how to involve a hydrogen taxonomy so that we can kind of understand, put together the framework for the investors with regard to what the life cycle impacts of that project are. And then the third item, and all these are in the hydrogen concept paper that was issued by the
Mike, 1 minute.
Excellent. So yeah, UNFC wants to do some pilot projects to really start looking at, because most of these projects have been de-risked on a technical side, technical feasibility. So they've moved from F2 to F1.3, but really we want to do some of these projects so that we have some analogs. The investors can take a look and understand really how the UNFC can help them evaluate these projects, understand the quantities involved, understand the life cycle aspects, and help them with their diligence on these projects and getting them financed. So that's, yeah, so really the ability to leverage these local resources and contributing to climate security, energy security, climate, and economic development is really driving the economic, social, and environmental viability of the projects. So then we've got hydrogens. really is going to become less costly than incumbent fuels in the near term. So if we achieve the same type of learning that we haven't seen in renewables and other sectors, and then the UN EGRM pilot work is really designed to de-risk those future hydrogen projects by providing financiers with classification of projects and quantities to be produced in that the new hydrogen taxonomy.
Thank you for keeping the time. We have now time for 1 or 2 questions at most, if there is. No questions? So I have 1 question for you. You talked about the EU, hydrogen taxonomy and the need to put in parallel this taxonomy with the reduction of to put the cost of hydrogen in line with the other the costs of other resources. What do you think it will be the biggest challenge to achieve that?
Sorry, the blending of the different technologies, and how do we work with the different specifications and lining up the different sources there, and because the greenhouse gases do drive the economics in large part, but also some of the social and climate issues. So it's going to be a difficult challenge in that integrating the different specifications is going to be something that we don't do a whole lot of. Most of the time we have a single technology project.
Thank you. I think now with no further ado, we have to change to Vitor Correia, Chair of the Experts Group, Resource Management Competency Working Group, and he will talk us about guidance note on competency requirements for estimation, classification, and management resources. The floor is yours, and please keep the time.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I won't be talking about oil and gas, and I won't be talking about hydrogen. I'm sorry, Mike. I won't be talking about minerals, but I will be talking about all the resources and something that is crucial to all of them when we are trying to implement the UNFC. And these are the competency requirements that we have. So I'm chairing the competency working group, and we started in 2018 a task that was to update the existing requirements. The 2 requirements that existed at that time were one for competent person, and the other one applied to minerals, of course, and the second one for evaluator qualifications applied to oil and gas. So these requirements are no longer valid because we came up with a solution that merged these options. And it's important to say that the solution we were asked to develop had to be sector neutral. And this is a huge challenge because something that is talking about competency applied to people that is coming from sectors like oil and minerals that are already well established, when compared to sectors like wind or power or solar, which sometimes they don't have the same sort of requirements or standards, is already a challenge. We also used to came up with a new wording because part of the problems that we were having, and if you were here yesterday, you noticed that some people was explaining that competent not necessarily means that you are qualified to do it. You might be a court and be competent. I believe it was Sigurd who advanced that example. So we changed the naming to another name, and now we have qualified experts, and the work of these qualified experts is now named qualified assessments. And then we also came up with several points that reinforce the trust on the estimations made by the qualified experts. So the trust on the qualified assessments. And I'll be back to these 4 points in a few seconds, but just let me to continue with the other aspects of these 6 key factors. An important one was the alignment of background and experience with the existing standards being applied in oil and gas and also in minerals. Basically, these are the, if you want, the core sectors with more expertise on the area. We also innovate in something that I believe changes, it's a sort of Columbo's egg. If you are not familiar with the history of Columbus and the King of Spain, I will talk about it later in the questions. But the Columbo's egg is a new approach, a new solution, and this statement provides that. And finally, and this was a requirement made very, very clear from the Secretariat and the Bureau, we should not be excluding anyone, because part of the problems that we were having were coming from the fact that some professionals were saying we cannot be a competent person or we cannot be an evaluator. Why? Because we don't have the infrastructure that allow us to become one. So these requirements that on competency now in place with UNFC do not exclude anyone. And as I said, the statement is a key part of the process. And now you have the statement on the screen. The statement has 10 points. And it does not require, it does not exclude anyone because it discloses who is making the assessment. So on the statement, the signatory of the statement say that he made the estimates, that he has a background on a specific, let's say, discipline, that he has graduated, that he's registered with a professional organization or not registered. It doesn't need to be registered. He's working with a professional body or he's working with a geological survey or with a company. Basically, he fills all these 10 points. And in case there is something that he cannot explain, he also needs to say why not. So but I visit the project site or I have not visited the project site. You are not, it's not mandatory that you have visited the project site to make a qualified assessment, but you need to disclose that on this statement. And finally, a very important one, the requirements for independence and objectivity. So the person who signs this statement says that I'm independent and I made the assessment on the best of my knowledge. But since we don't have any requirements on the capacity of the person or the background or the experience of the person that is signing this, the point is that we are giving to the readers of the statement the responsibility to, if you want to accept it and to put their trust on that assessment. Because if you are receiving an assessment of perhaps a wind project made by a nurse, it might not be a good fit, but it's up to you to decide it. Being the point that this is inclusive and it's a solution that gives to the stakeholders, to the readers, to the communities, to the governments, the capacity to understand how much trust they can place on that assessment. Just to close, I'd like to point out the fact that the competency working group had people from very different organizations working in many different sectors and from all over the world. And in a way, this was the solution that was accepted by all these people and the organizations that they represent, because it's sufficiently inclusive to be aligned with the oil and gas specifications from SPE or from the minerals specifications from CRISCO. And in a way, it builds on those and it creates the fundamentals for the other resources covered by the UNFC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for keeping the time. Just a small correction, he or she?
Sorry?
He or she?
He or she, of course. You are right.
Do you have any question from the floor? Again, one or two at most. I don't see any questions here from. Okay. Please. I cannot read where you are speaking from. Please, go ahead.
Здравствуйте, Игорь Шпуров. Hello, Igor Shkurov is my name. Could you kindly tell me whether this document is in line with requirements or whether this is just part of the requirements for the people who were confirmed in November? Or is this some addition to that document on requirements, and where can it be seen if this is just such an addition? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Igor. In fact, this is the document that was approved in the EGRM 13, so in November. We are just making this assembly aware that is there. It has been approved. It's a guidance document that was approved. So basically, no additions were made. So what you see in the template, all these things were there already. And these were the ones that were approved and discussed, and they will be published. And if they are not already online, they are already online. Thank you, Charlotte.
Okay, now I think we can move to the third speaker. Thank you, Vitor, and thank you for shortening the time. I ask Michael Ashka, Director Innovation and EU Relations at DMT. He'll talk to us from mine to market, the new ISO standard for ensuring sustainability and traceability of raw materials. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. The European Commission has released the EU Critical Raw Materials Act. And together with the Raw Materials Act, we have principles for sustainable raw materials. This is very important to have these principles, because when I started dealing with the topic sustainable raw materials about 4 or 5 years ago, when I asked people, depending on who you ask, how many schemes and standards for sustainability for raw materials are out there, I got answers between probably several hundred. Some people said around about 100. And so we have developed now a standard. We are just about to develop a standard. We have submitted the application to an ISO standard for sustainable raw materials. And I'd like to give you some details on that. And at the end of the talk, I would like to request your support, because the member states with ISO will vote on that standard at some point. So when I started looking into this topic, again, just trying to get my head around all these standards, I realized that somebody has to provide a structure. So I called colleagues at large companies, Siemens, Volkswagen, Daimler, Stellantis, also at UNECE, because they hold the holy grail for sustainability, right? And also at BGR, the German Geological Survey, and requested some help. And I said, please, can you help me sorting out the sustainability schemes across the world, I mean globally. And they did, and I jumped straight to the results. They came up with a report. It's called Sustainability Standard Systems for Mineral Resources. It's publicly available. You can download it on the website at EGR. And I'm jumping straight to the results. What you see here on that, and this is really the key slide, it's taken from the report, page 14. You see on the top, you see the actual supply chain. On the left side, you see upstream supply chain, then moving on to the downstream supply chain. The criteria is we need a standard that covers the full supply chain, right? Now, what you see here is none of the existing standards actually covers the full supply chain for sustainable raw materials. So this was the first finding. However, having said that, we found 5 standards to cover all commodities, at least for the upstream part. We're talking about ICMM from the UK. We're talking about IRMA from the US. We're talking about TSM from Canada, recognized in 119 countries, I understand. We're talking about the 4-in-1 standard from Germany by the TÜV Nord, and we're talking about the IFC by the World Bank. This is when it comes to mining and on-site processing. If you want to move up on the supply chain and include processing, smelting, and refining, you're left with only 3 standards: the Canadian TSM, the German 4-in-1, and the IFC by the World Bank. Yes, there are other standards that cover the full supply chain, but they are material specific, such as the Aluminum Stewardship Initiative. They cannot be applied to other commodities, but we seek a standard that can be applied to all commodities, all raw materials, whether they primary and secondary. So this is what our proposal is all about, a ISO standard, and we call it sustainable raw materials, and they will cover the full supply chain. And by doing that, we requested funding for a Horizon Europe project. We applied for the funding. We got the funding approved. The project is called Moderator that will help us to complete the SERA 4-in-1, the German SERA 4-in-1 standard that will have a competitive edge because it covers the full supply chain. By the end, we hope to complete that by the end of 2025. And we hope to use one of these standards, not necessarily the German one, it can be any of these standards, right? To use that as a backbone for the ISO standard. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we do have to do our homework, which is complete the standards for the full supply chain. And we don't have that many out there. So this is homework that needs to be done. And we hope to do that homework in the new ISO standard. This give you some details on the actual ISO standard. The scope is, first of all, needs to be modular so that we can amend and update industry best practices and the criteria. It needs to cover the full supply chain of all raw materials, but not mine closure or reclamation because it's not part of the active supply chain. We need to harmonize sustainability working group activities in ISO. Try to imagine there is an ISO standard for rare earth elements that has a separate working group on sustainability, and there is an ISO standard for lithium that has a separate working group on sustainability. This is not taking us forward. So we have to merge these activities and find one set of sustainability criteria. Very important. And I already mentioned this, we have to define industry best practice for circular economy, resource efficiency, waste recovery. So basically recycling, and also the material stewardship, such as energy transition and electrification. This is very important. As part of our structure, we think it's a good idea to subdivide this in three parts. First of all, a list with compliancy frameworks and regulations so that we can address regulations such as the EU Critical Raw Materials Act. The second part is list of the primary and secondary raw materials values chain addressed, non-agricultural raw materials. And third, list the accepted industry best practices, the actual meat and potatoes of the standard, right? So, and related to the accepted ESG criteria. When it comes to ESG criteria, to the actual EU principles for sustainable raw materials, we have to convince other standard organizations across the globe. This is easier said than done. However, may I remind these other standard organizations that these principles, they are related to the ESG criteria that are developed by the G7 and G20 countries. So they're not that exotic. It's nothing unique EU. This is something that they have already harmonized. It's very important that we communicate this. What we would like to propagate is to use a unique set of accepted principles or ESG criteria that are compliant with the EU principles for sustainable raw materials. This is what the standard can look like. I'm just taking one example out here. The standard benchmarking against category 3 of environmental principles, just one of 3 categories, right? So example here is environmental principles. We have the environmental management impact mitigation. And then I'm just taking out of an example, principle number 6, for instance, sustainable raw materials extraction and processing applies sound environmental management practices. This is all quoted from the EU principles for sustainable raw materials that is referred to in the EU Critical Raw Materials Act, right? I did not make this up. Issue number, I'm just taking out one of the issues. It's issue number A, applying sound science, knowledge-based environmental management, technical economic feasibility, which is in alignment with the current legal framework in place and the European Green Deal. The next column is the actual standard. This is why I put it in red. So the industry best practice, it's already out there. Part of it is already out there for the upstream part. We need to complete the downstream part, right? So part of it is already done. And the very right column, this is something from my industry. I'm from a certification industry, an audit catalog that actually measures how well this is being implemented by the mining companies, because EU Critical Raw Materials Act clearly state that they ensure competence and independence of responsible verifiers. So this is what we think a possible standard could look like. And this is where I would like to thank you.
Thank you very much for keeping the time. And again, I ask if there is Any question from the floor? No questions? I think that we don't have. Oh, yes, please, go ahead.
Minerals would be excluded. Oh. Okay, apologies. Yeah, just a quick one. I noticed you had listed non-agricultural minerals. Does that mean that fertilizer minerals are excluded from this? And like we heard an example earlier in the week of Karuna, where they have iron ore and then phosphate, which would be going for fertilizer and rare earths. So there was a mix of, so I'm just wondering I'm just wondering why it said non-agricultural raw minerals.
Sorry about the confusion. Phosphate is considered critical raw material and is certainly included in the raw materials. Yes.
I just wonder why was the reference in your slide to non-agricultural?
Because there are many raw materials that are considered agricultural, so we cannot include that. So if you want, we look at mineral raw materials. I should have made that more clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, another question, please. Quick question.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question. I see that you excluded mine closure and reclamation in terms of the standard. I'd like to challenge that. I don't know how you can have sustainable, responsible, sustainable resource supply without that included. Essentially, mine closure, if you've done it right, should actually minimize everything in terms of responsible sourcing of materials. Also, would just like to say there is actually an ISO standard on mine closure and reclamation.
Thank you for mentioning that. It's called ISO 82, as far as I remember. We have had a significant exchange with these people and with actually colleagues of mine, and we're very experienced when it comes to mine closure in Germany. It's not necessarily considered part of the value chain, and also to avoid overlap. See, this is why we separate the mine closure. Mine closure does not necessarily mean that you start recycling products. It may, but it may not necessarily. Thank you for very important.
So thank you, Michael. And now we move to Christian Spanu, Director Innovation from the International Council on Mining and Metals. And he'll talk to us about unlocking the blind spot, accelerating circularity, and minerals and metal companies. The floor is yours, Christian.
Having me, I'll try to move this. I think I'll start by introducing ICMM. ICMM is a very particular type of industrial organization. We focus solely in meeting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the targets in the Paris Agreement. We don't focus on progressing commercial aspects with our members. Our members are represented by 25 of the largest mining companies, and the governance is led by CEOs. If you look at those 25 mining companies, there are 650 sites in those companies. So we have a large footprint on the ground. We also represent 30% of the market cap. So it's a very different type of industrial organization. And one of the topics that we have been exploring is the circular economy. And that's because, there you go. That's because in looking at this topic, we have been thinking whether we need to step back and really focus on how can we succeed together. If we think about the more general classification or description of the circular economy, it's a single circle, usually a large market that is getting the materials. And usually the key objective is to reduce the volume of primary material going into that market and trying to be solely getting secondary material. That's, let's say, a very broad, high-level definition of success. The more we can rely on secondary material, that is through the different strategies in the circular economy, reducing, refurbishing, recovering, recycling, the better. And we have been thinking whether that's an area that we really want to get to. I mean, is that success for everyone? Is that really achievable? Is that something that we should be aiming for? And we think that there are two circles. The first one, for sure, the markets in the way they have described, but also a circle in the sourcing of these materials. And I'll try to go to the next slide to explain further. So if we think about success, you know, do we really think that closing the entry of primary materials is necessarily a success? And at this point, I want to make the first difference. If we're thinking about consumables, materials that have been designed to become waste in a single use or become waste very quickly, or there are technologies that make it very difficult to recover, then yes, I mean, we need to reduce, we need to substitute. Those are very clear strategies. But when we think about metals and mining, these are very durable, maybe the most durable materials we have at hand. And so do we really want to close the entry to those materials in the circular economy? Do we really need to step back and think about that we need materials that are able to be recovered forever, and think about the conditions that we need to put in place in those markets to recover those materials, in this case, metals and minerals, forever? And of course, there is a lot of work in doing that, but in the same way, we are not really including the picture of the countries that are supplying those minerals. And when we look about the circle, where, you know, resource-rich economies sit, usually developing countries, not always, but usually, we see that there is a lot going on in terms of making this operation circular. There is a lot of, if you read any of our members, we talk about precision mining. Every single company is looking at tailings, not only from a management point of view, but also on how to turn tailings into a new set of resources that you can recover forever. Thinking about how you completely circularize water, minimizing the use of electricity, maximizing the use of renewable electricity. Many of our members now are running only on renewable electricity in South America, for example. In Chile is a good example. So there is a lot of circular economy already happening in the processing side. And so one would think, is there a way that we can jointly think about a process of getting these minerals and metals that are durable, that we really need to drive a global, very quickly scale up of circular economy in the key markets that are out there? Can we really design a process of mining that is not classified necessarily as leaving a huge impact? And is there a way that we can work so that when we think about mining, we don't go immediately into negative conclusions? And this is one invitation that we're making here in terms of a call to action to work together. Because if we don't really take the responsibility in working together to design a process that allows us to get these durable resources that can be recovered forever in a way that drives a positive outcome to society, to the environment, and to everybody involved, to the nations that also own these resources, it might be that we go into a moment of friction, as the current definition of the circular economy doesn't allow or put barriers for these durable materials to enter markets. And in that situation, there is a lose-lose situation. We don't get the materials we need in the markets to drive and scale up the circular economy, and we get negative impacts in the countries that have and own these resources in the primary stock. So basically what we're saying is there is a moment where we need to reimagine. We need to reimagine the way we think about the circular economy. We need to step back and really think that in durable resources, we have to think about both sides, the processing side and the product side. On the processing side, we really need to get unlocked and always think that mining has to be a process that drives negative impacts. I need to acknowledge that in many instances in the past and still today, we will see impacts and we will see the kind of operations that we don't want for the future. But also we need to acknowledge that there is a lot of innovation and there is a lot of accelerated innovation in our members. We see that several times, and we can go further, but we need to unlock innovation in this space. We need to rethink how the processing side can look like so that we can drive circularity in both resource-rich countries that are usually on the developed side and the largest markets that are consuming and driving the demand for these durable materials. So that's our invitation, really. Rethinking the circular economy, trying to work together to get the durable materials we need to scale up the circular economy at the rate and scale that we need, a global true circular economy, but that drives incentives to also drive progress in developing nations and growth in a way that there is a win-win situation.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you for keeping the time. Do we have any question from the floor? One question in the end. Please go ahead. Please put Michael.
Yes, I'm Ludwig Hellmann from the European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform. And I have one remark in regard to your presentation, that the recyclers that are growing now in several countries, particularly in Europe, but also in Americas, they develop approaches that are really 100% use of resources. So I think we are at the stage where the mining sector can learn from the recycling sector, because they are sometimes forced to do more in terms of not leaving any tailings or any byproducts untreated, but to treat everything and to turn everything into a product. Thank you.
Like that. Can you hear me? Sorry. I was saying, thank you so much for bringing that example. And I think that the more we break paradigms, the way you are suggesting we should do now, and instead of in an arrogant way say, you know, you need to learn from us, you say, but let's learn from them. That's exactly what we need to do. I mean, we get stuck in paradigms. We're not going to go as fast as we need at the scale that we need. So absolutely, we need to get together. We need to learn from those advances. And I think when we think about the circular economy, we should always think beyond recycling. Recycling is the last tail of a linear economy. And it's brilliant that it's scaling up. It's brilliant that there is so much attention in there. But let's think about, for example, the value we can extract in materials in use. And there are two examples that I always use. I mean, the mobility industry, you know, if you think about a European car on average, is used 6% of the time. How can we bring that to 100% or close to 100%? That's circular economy. That's where you have the most leverage. And a car has, you know, several types of metals. Can we use business models to not sell the metals, but, you know, try to get to a place where you have a stock that you use and you get advantage from that? At that point, when you start to unlock innovation, as you suggest we should do, that's where we get the scale up at speed. So thank you.
Please, quick question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Richard. Quick question. In terms of governments and so public and private sectors, what do you think they can do to help enable a circular economy within the mining industry?
Thank you so much for the question. I mean, there's an absolutely critical role for working together, and that includes local governments, national governments, and I will go further. I mean, the financial sector, members players in the value chain. We need to go from a model that we have been using for 200 years or more. I mean, I'm Peruvian, and I would say 500 years. To a new model, and that includes, you know, changing regulation, changing policy, changing the infrastructure, changing business models. And if we try to do it all at once without coordination, it won't happen. And so if we go back to some transitions, taking, for example, the renewable energy transition that we're still trying to drive, there is an interesting pattern where you start to go from a silver bullet policy. You go back 15 years and we were all talking about a carbon tax that we're going to drive massive investment in renewables. And we very quickly learned that there is a package of policies. There's a package of policies, there's a package of mandates, of regulations, that if applied in the right sequence, you drive change at scale. We don't have that in the circular economy. And we don't have that in the circular economy in the process side, in whether you stimulate investment and, you know, change in the actual process of mining. And we don't have that in at scale and in a way that is understood in the same way that now in the climate space we have in the key markets. So absolutely, I mean, there needs to be dialogue, information, research to drive this policy package as fast as we can so that we can drive the systemic change together.
Thank you, Christian. And I will make an exception and take a question from the online. And it's from Kanindra. And she asks, reminding of an old tailing can generate wealth, but how the agricultural land damage by silt migration from tailing dams and degradation of forest floor by hilltop mining gets accounted in circular economy application.
I understood well. Although you can basically, although you can see tailings as a new resource, there is an environmental impact that people are concerned about. Is that the question? Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I mean, we are trying to bend a linear model into a circular one. So perfection won't exist. You know, the moment we start designing from scratch a circular system in the process of mining, we will get much closer to zero harm, positive net contributions, and let's say the true circular model of mining that we want to get. And that's been explored already by many members at ICMM and beyond. So I think we need to go step by step. It's very encouraging that we're stopping to see tailings as a liability, but we're starting to see them as a new resource. And I would say not only a new resource for metals and minerals, but a new resource overall. We're getting silica, we're getting many other very valuable and interesting sources of revenue, if you want, and value. How do we deal with the impacts that would generate is something that we really need to take care of, and not only environmental impacts, but also social impacts. And I will make a parallel with recycling. I mean, I always think about the first time that I went to a recycling facility at scale here in Europe. And I had a very lovely idea that, you know, it was going to be marvelous, a very clean, operation. We need to be careful. I mean, also recycling needs to be redesigned in a way that doesn't leave the environmental, you know, and we need a complete system thinking here. And for that, we need to work together.
Thank you, Christian, for tailoring circular economy. Now I give the floor to the last but not least, Serge van Gessel, Chair of the Expert Group Resource Management Injection Projects Working Group. He'll talk about insights and challenges regarding the positioning of injection projects in the UNFC context.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I would like to look at some of the things that are coming up for our group in the injection projects. We are covering CO2 storage in the underground. We're also covering natural gas storage, which is already quite mature. But one of the upcoming things that we will see also is a need for large-scale underground storage of hydrogen. And I think also with Mike McCurdy telling the story, I'm going to address a few things that he also mentioned. I try to start with some of the messages I think that are important. First of all, if you look at storage, the E-axis is often most critical for the injection, for the progress of injection and storage projects. There's a lot of delay because certain societal aspects are not taken up early enough. So the societal aspects need to be embedded in the early stages of technical conceptualization. That's important. Well, we have also seen already that hydrogen is expected to become a very critical carrier in the energy system, global transformation, and large-scale energy underground storage is going to be pivotal for that development of that hydrogen value chain. The technical potential for hydrogen storage is promising. It's under investigation, but we should consider the long lead times that we have, at least 5 to 10 years for projects to become really commercial. And we're dealing with an uncertain social license to operate, lacking insight in the market conditions, and also immature regulatory frameworks. And these are major concerns for the timely deployment of the technology itself. And finally, hydrogen and hydrogen storage are strongly interconnected in the UNFC resources system and the SDG aspects. And we think that the United Nations framework and UNRMS are also very important to provide the tools to monitor and manage these interdependencies. Now, looking at some of the resources we have CCS, global facilities and capacities are shown here from the Global CCS Institute report. Finally, there's quite a lot of projects becoming operational, but and there's also a promising amount of projects that are in advanced development, but still it's quite late. The technology is already quite long mature, and we already quite long know what is the potential. So there has been a lot of delay due to the societal aspects that the social license to operate, but also the economics for this technology. So we can learn from Now, we can also look at natural gas. This is a highly mature technology. There's 667 operational sites worldwide, over 400 billion cubic meters of storage capacity. What we see now, although it's quite mature and over the past period, we have seen some movement to decommissioning these sites. Lately, these have become, again, very high in the interest. So new sites are being constructed, also in other continents like China. Reopening of suspended facility is considered, and also due to the gas crisis that we have had also in the past year, there's an obligation to fill storages for 90% in Europe. That is, let's say, also a message and why it is still important and very actual. Now, hydrogen, in contrast, it's only 4 sites for pure storage and salt caverns worldwide and only 0.17 billion cubic meters. There's some pre-feasibility and feed studies for pilots and demos, but mostly we have to really boost this technology and to see that we can get the required capacities in 2030. Now, before I step into hydrogen storage, I would like to also stress that there's a strong interconnection between the different UNECE resource classification categories. And I would like to show that here for hydrogen and hydrogen storage. We can see minerals, petroleum, nuclear, bioenergy, all, let's say, the categories that are in the UNECE. The arrows here indicate that hydrogen is being produced from several of these resources, like petroleum. That's the gray hydrogen with CO2 emissions, but also going to the low carbon and even renewable storage capacities for hydrogen production. These are important as well, and they are strongly connected. So geothermal, hydropower, solar and wind are important for the timely production of hydrogen. Now, if we look at these storage at hydrogen, there is a need for storage and also transport infrastructure. Mostly this is focused on gas, pure hydrogen, which is pressurized, or blended hydrogen, which is blended into natural gas. Not only, let's say, hydrogen itself is important, or let's say the resource where it comes from, but also the infrastructure that is being repurposed. It's the platforms, it's the pipelines for transportation. And then going to injection, we also reuse often the storage spaces that are left from earlier production, empty gas fields, but also produce salt caverns. Now, the demand for hydrogen is expected to become quite high. We've seen projections also from the first speaker. If you look at several of the projections and we combine that with, let's say, the expected ratio for what that means for storage, and we follow the same ratio as we have now for natural gas and natural gas storage, then we get to storage volumes that are above the current volumes that are known for natural gas storage. So we might need more sites, and that means that we need to deploy a lot of salt cavern storage sites and even depleted gas fields or aquifers where we can store the hydrogen in large quantities. Having said that, we're still at a low TRL level. Hydrogen, pure hydrogen storage is still actually pre-commercial. It's also pre-demonstration. Some demonstration projects are coming for salt caverns and also for gas fields, but we're still quite low. And we need to bridge that gap to get to either commercial demonstration or commercial operation. And that takes a long time. That said, we also have to do that in context of a lacking market for hydrogen storage at the moment. So that's a challenge, and also the social license to operate is still challenging. Now, we have a lot of potential across Europe. This some maps of Europe showing where we could potentially deploy hydrogen, either by using existing or repurposing existing underground storage sites for gas, but also depleted gas fields that are still out of operation, and sites where we can deploy new salt caverns. But we should note that this is also not yet sites that have a project attached to it. But still, we should investigate these things, and they are only in one single category in the UNFC system, but it's important to pre-sort already these capacities to prepare also the link with the backbone, transport backbone that we need to lay out, and also to prepare society for where we can deploy storage sites. And if we go to the match capacity, of course, what we've shown here is a big capacity, but only a small amount remains. Now, the challenges are at various levels. We have the geological challenges, where we have geochemical and microbial impacts of stored hydrogen, the storage integrity, but also the performance and recoverability of storage of hydrogen from a reservoir. And we need, of course, the knowledge for screening and exploring the right sites. Then the technical dimension considers all the facilities that are on top of at the surface to run the storage site. And also there we have to consider where we can deploy these the sites, but also the technical criteria like how to purify the hydrogen to the specs of the transport system. Then the energy system is important as well, because this defines where we need to deploy the sites and also what kind of supply and demand profiles we have to get to. And of course, the cost and revenue models are important. And finally, I think the most important one for the success of this technology is the societal embeddedness. We need to understand the societal costs and benefits. We need to involve all the stakeholders, public engagement, the life cycle assessment, but also understand the environmental footprint and embed that also in the regulations and policies. Now, we're looking into our latest report for IEA. We have just published that, almost ready. We have looked at a methodology to have a very systematic approach to assessing the societal embeddedness, and that goes along with the progressing in the TRL, the technical readiness level. And you see 4 stages of societal embeddedness levels, going from exploration, development, demonstration, deployment, which cover 4 major dimensions: impact on environment, stakeholder involvement, policy, regulations, and market and financial resources. Now, the idea is that you set at each stage, you set certain milestones that you need to reach, and they can be aligned with the UNFC system. So it's actually, you set the criteria that you need to address when you want to get to a next level in UNFC. So this comes to an approach where we have scorecard methods that we are now elaborating, and where you can see where am I, at what level am I currently, what level is required regarding the TRL, and what are the steps needed to get to the right level of societal embeddedness. And with that, I would like to close my talk, again stressing the first point: the societal aspects need to be addressed at a very early stage of technical conceptualization. Thank you.
Thank you, Serge. Again, I put the possibility for one question from the floor. Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Serge, for the interesting presentation. I'm Ignatiy Volnov from a Society of Petroleum Engineers. I'm just curious in the alignment between the UNFC in the storage and the SPE RMS, which is the has been started since 2017 and approved by the SPE board as the storage resource management system, and the guidelines has been established 2022. Did you provide any kind of work of comparison or the bridging?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, we are currently also updating our specifications, and we take into account also the SRMS. And of course, this means that a bridging between both UNFC and SRMS is going to be established, besides maybe also some other classification systems. I think the strength is in binding these classification systems and not seeing them as separate bodies to classify resources. Integrate them and have the strength from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Serge. I have one more question from the floor. In fact, it's 2 questions, but I will take one. what mitigation measures are in place to mitigate long-term environmental impacts in storage sites, including leaks?
Question, thank you. Well, one of the main challenges, first of all, is that we have the right monitoring equipment. We need to be able to monitor the wells. We need new materials in the wells, new designs, and we need to be able to monitor whether hydrogen is going to escape. Then, with hydrogen coming free, we need to understand, of course, what the impact would be. But the same safety procedures would probably apply also at the surface. But the most important part is now also the prevention and to understand the processes that might lead to leakage. Yeah.
Thank you, Serge. And now we'll have the second round. So I ask you a big round of applause. Thank you. Very good. Thank you. Serge, maybe you have more questions, at least one more that you can answer. No, to in the chat. So that we have no more delays, maybe you'll hear Carl, Peter van der Keur, I hope spelling well, Barbara Purewal, Alexander Spielman, Hassan Al-Marzouki, and Maria Francisca Valenzuela. Please take the floor. Charlotte, are we missing speakers? Are we missing speakers?
So there's some online.
Ah, okay. Okay. Sorry. Thank you for being here. And without further ado, I will ask Ulrich Karl. Ah, no, not the Peter van der Keur to take the floor.
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the chair, and thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for being here and present the working group for groundwater resources. I'm the chair, and I coach. I have Kevin Parks, who was the chair from 2020 to 2022 as a co-author. He also used a lot of effort on developing the UNECE for groundwater resource, and also acknowledge, of course, the groundwater resource working group as such. So I will tell firstly about the
the UNECE for groundwater resources, how we develop it, how we develop the supplemental specifications for it. It's still work in progress, but also I will tell a little bit about how we try to have outreach for what we are doing within the working group. So we're being part of the various fora and conferences to tell about and also to get input to the work we are doing. And this process we started in Copenhagen in September last year, where we had a water congress exhibition in Copenhagen, as said. And under the International Water Association, where we had a workshop on the application of the UNECE for groundwater resources. And this audience, or the target group, was practitioners, so the users of the groundwater UNECE, to come with input and to tell us whether they understood the E and the F and the G axis, and what they think would be needed to further develop it. The first draft of the specifications was published in 2021, and the group itself worked from 2019. And we are now in the process of revisiting the groundwater specifications to make it more applicable for the anticipated users. And so this was discussed in this workshop in September, and there was a lot of input, especially on how to apply it on transboundary aquifers, groundwater resources, and that underlined the need for the UNECE groundwater to have a common classification system across boundaries, barriers, borders. I mean, so this was the first step. Then the work of the working group was also presented. Was also part of a side event on the first UN summit on groundwater in Paris in December last year. And there we were part of a side event on innovation and how they can contribute to solve the groundwater challenges and accelerate the transition, so the green transition, the energy transition, in which all groundwater is part. And so there we discussed the role of the UNFC and later on also on the UNRMS in this part. And also how it relates to the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And this process was continued in March this year in New York, where we had the groundwater as part of the water conference, and there we also stressed the need of open data. And open access data for water management is crucial, and it is crucial for otherwise you cannot make informed decisions, and you can also not supply the UNRMS with relevant data for water management, groundwater management. And so this was well received. It was webcasted live. And there will be a summary of this, and we hope to keep the groundwater on top of the agenda for water resources. As you can see, the UNESCO who organized the Paris conference last year published this groundwater, making the invisible visible, because it is too often that it is not recognized that in integrated water resource management, the surface water and the groundwater are connected, and so you cannot really do surface water water management without taking into account the groundwater. And so this is something we think has a top priority. So for As you can see here, there's still a lot to be done. Here you can see the water security. So as related to the SDG 6, the water goal. You can see in much of the northern hemisphere, there's quite good groundwater accessibility, but still many countries, especially in Africa, which actually possess huge amounts of groundwater, but cannot really access this for various reasons, and also to get it from one place to another is a major problem. And here, the UNECE system as a project-based system to find out whether groundwater projects can be carried out or not is of vital importance. And also, therefore, we try to set up a case study in South Africa to demonstrate this, to demonstrate the use of UNECE under African conditions. So groundwater is actually connected to many of the Sustainable Development Goals. As you can see here, this is based on the study in 2018, where you can see how groundwater positively affects. So sustainable groundwater abstractions positively affects the Sustainable Development Goals. And there are some SDGs which have a mixed impact, and there's also some which have a conflicting impact. But for the UNECE work, we in the context of the E-axis, so the environmental impact of groundwater abstraction to make groundwater extraction as a project viable. We strongly look at how it can impact, for instance, ecosystems. Many of the ecosystems are groundwater supplied, groundwater supported, and so if you unsustainably abstract groundwater, that may have serious implications for the Sustainable Development Goals and for ecosystem service. And so and this is already implemented in, for instance, in the European Water Framework Directive and the Groundwater Directive, the sister directive. And so this is something we need to link to the UNECE in developing the bridging documents, which is still something we need to do. So this is the general design of the groundwater specifications. So you can see the E, the socio-economic viability, and as we heard from the previous speaker, this has had one of the major interest and major importance, and that's also the case for the groundwater resources. So we put a lot of effort. So if you do the supplemental specification for groundwater resources, most effort was put into the environmental socio-economic viability, because sometimes it is not so easy. If you look at countries where you only subtract water from shallow groundwater, then this may have this may be unviable to dig deeper. Maybe groundwater resources are available deeper down, but it is financially not feasible. It can also be the case that if you abstract the water from deeper down, it will impact the ecosystem services, and then also this will not be viable. But sometimes in some places, maybe you have not viable projects, but still people need water, and so in the end, you may need to provide water, groundwater for the population. And maybe violating the criteria within the UNECE. That is also something we need to look at. There was also something which was raised in the in the workshop we had in Copenhagen in September, where there was quite some concern about how to do this, because it was, yeah, maybe sometimes you say, okay, this is an immature project, but still the indigenous people need water, and this needs to be taken account of. So this is the draft specifications.
Please wrap up.
Excuse me.
Please wrap up.
Yeah. So the work in progress, what we are currently looking at is groundwater resources is not a commodity in the sense of oil and gas. Some of the groundwater resources are renewable, so groundwater will be supplied from other aquifers or from recharge, but some of them are non-renewable resources. So most of the work is now concentrated on making this distinction. We also consider doing a flowchart, and we also have prepared a network proposal under the International Association for Hydrogeologists to link to the hydrogeological community for the benefit of the work we are doing within the working group. This is something we still work on. And this is it. And I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. We have time for one question from the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for this very good presentation, and I do understand the focus is on groundwater. My question is, as a second stage, we know that in many places there is a temptation to recycle wastewater after treatment for agricultural use or whatever. Is this type of project something that you may consider in your groundwater working group in the future, having identified this as also a resource?
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, so this is something we have not directly addressed yet, but it is very relevant. And so sometimes you have limited access to groundwater, and then of course it will be of very much importance to recycle or to purify water, also surface water as a complementary resource to groundwater.
Thank you very much. And now we'll have the pleasure to hear from Ulrich Grau, chair of the expert group, Resource Management Anthropogenic Resources Working Group. We'll talk us about the challenges of developing and applying UNFC to anthropogenic resources.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, the purpose, of course, as you all know, of the UNFC is to compare individual site-specific recovery projects on a common playing field. And in the run-up of this presentation, I just screened 20 different case studies that applied the UNFC to anthropogenic resources. And based on this review, I've identified 3 challenges for developing and applying the UNFC to anthropogenic resources. And well, it's just a personal selection of challenges. There might be more, but I'm pleased to present them to you. It's not completely randomless, this selection of the challenges. The first challenge will go purely and directly to the UNFC. The second challenge addresses the consideration of UN RMS principles, especially for circularity in the UNFC. And the third challenge addresses the information disclosure to the clients who are asking for the data and the project assessments. On the first slide, I briefly explain what are anthropogenic resources, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. An anthropogenic resource is a kind of concentration or accumulation of materials in our society, and these materials are of potential economic interest. And let's say there are two groups depending on the source of the material. On the one hand, we have the mining and the metallurgical residues. And on the other hand, we have the post-consumer residues. They are also called end-of-life wastes, depending on the jurisdiction where you are in the world. The overall question is how to convert these residues into new products and how to make this comparability of projects with the help of the UNFC. And there are three challenges, I think. The first challenge is the evidence on the future waste flows. Yeah. So the UNFC claims, let's say, to deliver or disclose the cumulative production over time. So we're talking about future flows, and especially if we're coming to recycling, recovery, and end-of-life flows, we need the evidence on future waste flows, which are the feedstock into the recycling system. And on this slide, you see the classes of the UNFC classes. And the first group, which are the viable projects, the potentially viable projects and the non-viable projects, and of course the remaining projects not developed from identified projects, they relate to known sources, right? And the definition of the known sources or the narrative for putting, let's say, a project into one of these four classes is that the product quantity estimate is based on direct evidence. The second group are the potential sources that can be allocated to prospective projects, for instance. And these product quantity estimates are based on indirect evidence. And this perfectly works for a mineral in the earth or on the earth that can be sampled and analyzed. It can be observed. You can go there, you can make drill holes, you can take the sample, you can analyze the composition and the material characteristics. So this is direct evidence. But if you're coming to future waste flows as a feedstock into recycling plants, there is no direct evidence. It's indirect evidence. We cannot sample future waste flows and we cannot analyze future waste flows in terms of sampling, making statistics on the material composition. Of course, we can sample the waste flows of today and make a prediction based on the inclusion of the sampling results and other external factors which depend on the income in the population and so forth, but it's indirect evidence. So this would mean if you purely apply the UNFC to anthropogenic resources, that all projects are allocated to G4 because we only have indirect evidence on the flows. And with this slide, I just want to make a call to think about the definition and application of the G-axis categories. Maybe some minor modifications are needed to apply the terms and the principles of the UNFC also to anthropogenic resources. At this point, I have to mention that all these 20 case studies that I've reviewed, they really successfully demonstrated the application of the UNFC to anthropogenic resources. But they just assumed, let's say, that that the results are based on direct evidence, but in fact, it's not the case. Challenge 2, UNFC definition of a project. On the right-hand side, you see, let's say, just a dummy process, dummy recycling process, feedstock coming into the plant, into the facility. We have, of course, emissions. We have products which are sent to the market, and we have residues. And the UNFC is tailored to classify the recovery or recycling project based on the maturity level, viable, potential viable, non-viable. And this is also defined in the UNFC guidance note to support the UNFC 2009 definition of a project. But if we're talking about recycling, the feedstock, let's say, depends on the material characteristics of the waste that is generated after it turns into waste. It depends on the collection. There could be a separate collection or non-separate collection in a country. It depends on the treatment process, on the technologies that are currently in place. So all these previous steps in the recycling chain determine, let's say, the characteristics of the future feedstock and therefore the quantity and the quality of the products. So we could also think about the maturity of the recycling chain as a whole. So not only about the maturity of individual recycling and recovery projects. So here we are talking about the system readiness in a technology sense, and not only about the technology readiness of individual processes. So is the system of the recycling chain already ready or not, or where we are with this? And we can add also the production chain to this life cycle of the materials, including mining and production. We can assess the maturity of the production chain, and of course, in the production chain, also the maturity level of individual mining projects, for instance. But as you can see, it depends on this scope of definition of what is a project in the UNECE, and currently the definition limits the scope to individual recycling and recovery project. And it even becomes more complex if we add the flows, so the products that are generated from the recycling process that are fed into the production. If you think about steel or any kind of metal, it's mixed in the smelter, primary and secondary, in order to give the secondaries a new life, in order to enter the use phase again. And if we take this full scope into account, we can talk about the maturity of the whole value chain. And this means if you think about the principles of the United Nations Resource Management System, there's one principle that is called circularity. And if we want to implement the circularity principles, we have to think in systems, let's say. This was also mentioned by two previous speakers, for instance, by Mr. Haschke, who introduced the new ISO standard to assess and take into account the whole value chain and not only individual recovery projects. So it would be interesting to learn from this ISO standard and to integrate it maybe into the maturity, in order to assess the maturity of value chains, not only of individual recovery projects. It's complementary, I think. And this brings me to the conclusion of this slide. As mentioned, the current UNECE guidance note to support the UNECE 2009 definition of a project limits the scope to individual recovery project. And this is just a call to think about this definition, and maybe there could be an update and some thinking and some discussion, some consensus-based process within the EGRM to extend the scope to the maturity of recycling chains, to the maturity of production chains, and maybe also to the maturity of value chains. And my last slide is the challenge 3. It's the project reporting. Of course, the UNECE evaluates and classifies recovery projects by maturity level. And in the very end, the individual results of the classifications enter a project inventory. As we have learned from the first day that DG GROW is currently building such a project inventory. Project inventories are built on company level, and project inventories are also built on state level, national level, by national authorities and commissions. In order to create this inventory, you need 4 steps to assess each individual recovery project. The first step is the project definition. The second is the project evaluation. It's the classification, and then the reporting. I think you all know this. The point is that the UNECE documents currently provide guidance to define these recovery projects, as we've seen in the previous slides. And it also provides guidance to classify the recovery project. And what is currently where's currently no guidance is about the project reporting, let's say, to disclose the information to a project inventory. And I'm now just talking about these 20 case studies. Yeah, when you have a look to these 20 case studies, all of them successfully applied the UNECE to anthropogenic resources. But each of these case studies discloses different types of information to the client. Yeah. Of course, each of these case studies discloses the maturity level of the recovery project. Yeah, some of them also discloses the barriers and the enablers that are currently present that justify the classification of the recovery project, and that indicates potential interventions, let's say, to move the project along the project pipeline towards production. And the third level of information, which I think is also of key importance, is additional project-related information which is independent, which doesn't affect the classification as such. Yeah, this is, for instance, the number of jobs that are created in the region, or it's also the environmental impacts that can be assessed. And these three levels of information is just an example how to structure the disclosure of information, but currently there is no guidance. And if I have a look to the other case studies that have been produced by the EGRM, you find similar patterns. Yeah. So the type of information, the structure, how to deliver the information to the project inventories, there's currently no structure, even all the results are correct, right? And I think this is needed. It's just a proposal to think about this, because the project reporting is really essential, I think, because it's the communication channel between the UNFC practitioners on the one hand and the clients on the other hand. And if the clients receive the same type of information, it's easier to make decisions on an evidence-based. So this is just a call to think and develop reporting templates in cooperation with the clients. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jurek, for putting us the challenge to still UNFC has still room for modifications. So one question from the floor, if there is any. I think we now should move to an online presentation. So now we have Barbara Rebil, expert group resource management petroleum working group chair, and she's talking to us about updated bridging documents.
Today I'd like to talk to you about the 2023 update of the bridging document between the Petroleum Resources Management System, or PRMS, and the United Nations Framework Classification for Resources, or UNFC. A bridging document in this context facilitates an explanation of the relationship between the UNFC and other classification systems. The Society of Petroleum Engineers, or SPE, and on behalf of its co-sponsors, maintains and publishes
So we have a slight change of agenda, and I will move the floor to Alexander Spielman. Please take the chair. Alexander Spielman is the Technical Advisory Group co-chair, and he will address to us.
Уважаемые коллеги,
Distinguished colleagues, we would like to present the new version of the bridging document between the Russian classification on oil and fuel gas reserves and resources and in fact, I've prepared my presentation in English to make it easier for you to read my slides, but I'm going to be presenting in Russian, says the speaker. So, as I was saying, and I'm just trying to find the right place. The bridging document is a system aligned. It's bridges between the Russian 2013 classification and the UNFC 2019. And there was a need to create a new version of the bridging document for various reasons. One of them was the new version of the UNFC 2019. So we had to make some changes in the bridging document. And we had done about 20 or 30 projects by that time. And then UNFC and the PRMF document, both of those gave us experience to see how to optimize the bridging document. So we moved through all stages of adoption of the document. The new version of the bridging document is of May 2020. It was then sent to the Petroleum Working Group, and it was considered from June to November 2020 with participation by 4 experts from the oil sector, led by Barbara Purewal, who wasn't able to connect, but I'm extremely grateful to her for organizing this work. It was very useful work. We made about 30 changes on all areas, on the substance and also on terminology. And then the document went to the technical advisory group. And I want to thank Dr. Satinder for helping us to organize the work on consideration of it in the TAG in December 2022. After that, it came to the Bureau. It was published on the ECE site, and I thank Charlotte Griffiths for her help with publishing it. And thus, we were able to keep to the rules on consideration of documents. It's now being submitted. It's been submitted to EGRM 14 for review and approval. I want to show you some of the amendments. In particular, there is a project principle. All of the projects in Russia are set out in terms of an ascending order of maturity. And the classification by maturity is not a principle in the Russian classification. It's usually covered in different instruments. So we had to use a number of instruments together with the classification in order to bring it further into line with UNFC, which made it possible for us to compare all of the Russian projects. You can see those on the left and the UNFC ones on the right. On reserve categories, and the comparison is much more clear here. Thus, we can see how to use the reserve categories and the type of project. And We also show the changes in the main table compared to the previous version. You can see that there are changes in terms of categories and names. But there are no major changes here. The document was adopted and it is aligned with UNFC. In terms of the G-axis, there are no changes. And here's the final table, the matrix E and F axes. As you know, that's standard for UNFC, and all of the cells are aligned between the two classifications. All project classifications are aligned. We decided not to go beyond those categories, otherwise the bridging document would be problematic to use. So that is one of the main principles of the new version of the bridging document. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you, Alexander. We have one question. Please go ahead.
If I may, I would like to ask my question in Russian, says the speaker. Thank you very much for the interesting presentation and for the work done. As you know, the classification, the Russian classification 2013 is not directly comparable to similar classifications such as PMRFS and UNFC. As we can see that from the table, categories C1 and C2 fall within various categories, and the same is true with ABC1. It fits with various UNFC categories. Maybe you can tell me how you avoided that duplication in accounting, double accounting, and how you ensured the appropriate linkages between the documents and between the categories and two documents. Thank you. Yes, I've understood the question. There wasn't any duplication here. If you look at the bridging document between the PRMS and the UNFC, everything happens there as well, everything you've mentioned. One of the drafts, one of the categories in the PRMS matches several cells in the UNFC and so forth. And why is there no duplication? Because when you transfer to UNFC, that factor is taken into account. This is the point of the UNFC. It is more granular, and if you look at CEF, that gives a more granular distribution of the categories. So where you transfer the reserves, certain things have to be taken into account because you have this greater granularity. That's true in the Russian bridging document and in the PRMS bridging document. So we tried to make sure that it was comparable.
Thank you, Alexander. And now we'll move again to online recording and to try to listen to Barbara Purewal.
Today, I'd like to talk to you about the 2023 update of the bridging document between the Petroleum Resources Management System, or PRMS, and the United Nations Framework Classification for Resources, or UNFC. A bridging document in this context facilitates an explanation of the relationship between the UNFC and other classification systems. The Society of Petroleum Engineers, or SPE, and on behalf of its co-sponsors, maintains and publishes the petroleum commodity-specific specifications via the PRMS. A previous bridging document between the 2009 edition of UNFC and the 2007 publication of PRMS was published in 2013. This 2023 bridging document aims to update the relationship to be consistent with the 2018 edition of PRMS and the 2019 edition of UNFC. The principles in PRMS have provided many of the foundations and keystones for the consistent application of UNFC for petroleum resource projects. The updates of PRMS and the UNFC did not change the principles that underpin the systems, but did include additional terminology and clarification of definitions. Importantly, PRMS is a two-dimensional system, whereas the UNFC is a three-dimensional system. PRMS classes and subclasses can be directly mapped to UNFC classes and subclasses. However, UNFC applies a greater level of granularity in representing subcategories of technical feasibility, the F-axis, and environmental, social, economic viability on the E-axis. Overall, discovered petroleum initially in place can be mapped to known sources, and undiscovered petroleum initially in place can be mapped to potential sources. Further, reserves can be mapped to viable projects, contingent resources to potentially viable and non-viable projects, prospective resources to prospective projects, and unrecoverable to remaining products. The degree of confidence G-axis of UNFC and the range of uncertainty X-axis of PRMS can be directly mapped. A corresponding G1, G2, and G3 should be provided for any given project and represent the associated low, best, and high estimates. G-axis categories may be used discretely or in cumulative form. Technical feasibility and environmental socio-economic viability are mapped to two axes for UNFC. In PRMS, this is combined into one mapping of increased chance of commerciality on the Y-axis. The result of this difference is that direct mapping of the Y-axis and the E and F axis is not always straightforward. UNFC subcategories set minimum standards for the UNFC subclasses, although PRMS identifies technical feasibility and environmental and social issues as factors, amongst others, to be considered in the viability of any project. UNFC has a unique clarity in expanding the handling of these issues in relation to their impact on project development and life cycle. In UNFC, environmental and social issues are an integral part of assessing the economics and viability of the project and may be used as a traffic light for the project to proceed based on relevant social and environmental metrics. Conversely, non-compliance with relevant environmental and social criteria may also lead to the suspension of an existing project or the deferment of a planned project. Any economic viability analysis needs to incorporate expected future product demand and policy implications by governments and regulatory authorities to achieve net zero emissions. This may include policies such as a requirement for carbon capture and storage or other nature-based solutions and additional tariffs and taxes. The use of UNFC and PRMS to describe petroleum resource projects should be seen as complementary, and the application of each system is dependent on the purpose of the evaluation and reporting requirements. I would encourage governments, regulators, and private entities to evaluate their petroleum projects using both systems to provide a comprehensive and informed basis for decision and policy making. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Cannot hear me. We cannot put questions. Maybe if you want to have some questions, you can put directly to Barbara. Satinder, you want to say something?
Very much. I just wanted to make a clarification with Alex's permission to the question that was posed while he was standing up. Now, as far as these two bridging documents are concerned, we're bridging PRMS to UNFC and the Russian system to UNFC. So do not, logic dictates, do not have to have a bridging document for PRMS to the Russian system. they're all linked. So I just wanted to make that logical clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Satinder, for the clarification. Okay. So we are running late. We have to move ahead. So,
1 minute.
okay, if the question is a direct question, okay, no?
Yes. Yeah. Take the floor.
Okay.
Yes, it's an answer to, thanks for letting me talk. It's an answer to Satinder's comment. Actually, the bridging document between PRMS and UNFC already exists, between PRMS and RF 2013 already exists, has been developed between the Russian Federation and SPE. And I think, as was mentioned during the first day, if you actually use two different, there is no budgetion between systems. So if you actually do a round of, if you use a bridging document from PRMS to UNFC and then go back from UNFC to PRMS, you will not necessarily have the same answer. So I think it's important to have the three bridging documents if people want to work correctly. Thanks much.
Thank you. Now it's time to move on to Hassan Al-Marzouki,
Yes, thank you, Teresa. Thank you.
the Director General, Planning and Development of Saudi Geological Survey, and he's going to talk us about how Saudi Arabia is transforming its mineral sector for the future.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for giving me opportunity to highlight the mineral and mining sector in Saudi Arabia. In this presentation, we'll cover these topics about overview and geology of Saudi Arabia, minerals resources, and example of some minerals and industry in Saudi Arabia, new mining strategy, a new mining law, investment law, and industrial cities. First of all, we give a brief about the geology of Saudi Arabia. Who isn't familiar with the geology of Saudi Arabia? It consists of 4 geological units: the Arabian Shield, which is the oldest part of the Precambrian rocks, about 545 million years ago. And this one in the western part of Saudi Arabia. And the second one, the Arabian Platform, was exposed in the north and east of the Arabian Shield and consists of Phoenozoic sedimentary rocks, and it forms 2/3 of the land of Saudi Arabia. The third one is lava fields, which is called Harats, which come from the north to the south, Saudi Arabia, and the last unit is coastal plain, which is Arabian Peninsula, this tertiary sedimentary rocks. Okay. Here we'll give you general facts about the land of Saudi Arabia, about 2 million square kilometers, and the Arabian Shield with Harat, about 6,330 square kilometers, and the Arabian Platform about 1,320 square kilometers. During the 40 to 50 years ago, we discovered more than 5,500 locations of different commodities. Here we talk about the metallic, around 3,000 metallic locations in Saudi Arabia. Most of them is gold and copper and silver, and some lead and nickel, zirconium, tin and niobium, and tantalum as well. For industrial mineral, okay, we have the majority of calcium carbonate is almost limestone and dolomite. We have clays, different type of clays. We have andesite, zeolite, kyanite, and garnet, and zircon, and different type of industrial. We'll give a brief also about the industrial rocks of minerals. The main commodities are phosphate and bauxite, calcium carbonate, gypsum, clay, and some of ornamental stone, feldspar, silica sand, and magnesite, and basalt. This all commodity was extracted for ceramic and glass industry, for cement manufacturing, and fillers, insulation, also agriculture, also for petrochemical industry. Here we give some significant minerals resources across the kingdom with the growth incentive in three category of confidence, 10% and 50 and 90. This, for example, for iron ore about 70. For niobium is about 41. Actually, uranium is still under studies starting from 2019. We'll finish next year. Also, we have copper, zinc, silver, and some of silica as well. The value of this commodity is about 1.3 trillion. This was estimated in 2019. And now other mining team working to update this number as well. To support mining strategy and mining sector in Saudi Arabia, actually the government set about one initiative, the new mining strategy initiatives, which contain about 40 sub-initiatives under the main initiative. Also release the mining investment law this in 2020 to support investors, to encourage them, to invest in the mining sector. Also release in 2021 the geoscience database, which is a big platform now, and lots of visitors around last year, 2022, about 25,000 visitors from about 55 countries around the world. This about highlights for mining, some mining strategy figures about job growth by 2030, about 200,000 jobs in the mining sector. Also be the third pillar in the Saudi industry, beside oil and gas and petrochemical. Also contribute to Saudi GDP. The future mining figures for GDP, for example, by 2035, about $75 billion US, about plus more than 50 minerals identified in the kingdom and promising area, about for the last importer mineral product globally. The main support organization in the mining sector, which is Saudi Geological Survey, by data, provide all, investor by data, researchers. We have a good platform now, geoscience database, which is now working with the GTK to evaluate the data. Also, the other platform, this mining regulations and license, you can apply online for any, promising commodities. This some of our type of mining license. We have reconnaissance license, we have mine license, we have small mine license, and have construction material quarry license, exploration license. This is some of existing industry mining activity in Saudi Arabia, beside also petrochemical and oil and gas. You have more than 15 cement factories, 8 ceramic factories, gypsum have more than 5, rock wool, 2 factories, and glass industry, for glass industry, 5 factories. We have aluminum smelter in the north part. We have more than 8 gold mines and 2 copper mines. For elemental stone quarries, we have more than 20 factories. This cover around 45 quarries around the kingdom, more than 50 quarries already. We have also the phosphate, DAB, and MAP. So the government actually to support, investing in mining sector and industry, actually put a new cities, industrial cities. In one place, you can provide water and energy. You have support services such as housing, education, business in one area. The example of this industry cities, Wad al-Shamal, this in the north part, and Ras al-Khair. Also, this all with supporting mining, like railways, we have ports and power desalination plant. The mining initiative impact will put the baseline in 2020, for example, and the KPIs for some of the initiatives until 2025. For example, now we have more than 183,000 employees in the mining sector. By 2025, we reach 22,000. For the total exploration spending about $20 per square kilometer, and reach 53 square kilometer in 2025. For mining gross capital formation about 3.36 in 2020, and reach 30 billion US dollars by 2025. For about the license, in 2020 we issued about 1,944 license in different commodities. We reach in 2025 3,661,000. This total direct governmental revenue in 2020 $143 million US dollars, and reach by 2025 230 millions. Okay, why investing in Saudi Arabia? Some people asking this, the international local investor. Actually, we have geographic location, the strategic location of Saudi Arabia, provide easy access to export and value-added minerals to GCC countries, Asia, Africa, and Europe. Significant resources. We have more than 40 commodities, promising area. We've done last year this evaluation for rare earth elements in different places around the kingdom. We have a good infrastructure. We'll develop the infrastructure, banking system, in industrial structure, and cheap electricity, water. Also, the industrial cities have now about 4 industrial cities, 2 in the north and 2 in the south. We have stability, will develop banking and finance system. Governmental support. Also, Saudi government will provide initiatives to investors that minerals and mining sector will support everyone, to can invest in Saudi Arabia. Thanks.
Thank you, Hassan.
Thank you.
Any questions from the floor? So have one question there.
Yeah, my question is to Mr. Mazzouri. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. Just based on the slide you presented, how the program of the resource assessment of the minerals that you have fits with the requirement of the renewable energy programs and plans of the kingdom, how they fit to the programs.
Actually, start last year, we put one initiative to evaluate renewable energy and all transition elements. We're still working in that. We use some standard to evaluate this sites locations. Also, to try to apply UNECE also system to evaluate this all locations.
Thank you, Asa. Quick question, please.
I understand about the mining strategy. You mentioned industrial cities. Is there a plan to go downstream in the value chain from mining thanks to industrial cities, or just?
Yeah, actually both for downstream and upstream, all industrial cities.
So thank you, and it's time to move to the last presentation, which will be held by Maria Francisca Valenzuela, Head of Office of Gender and Human Rights in Ministry of Energy of Chile, and she'll present to us gender-sensitive policymaking in the energy sector, lessons and outlook from the Energía Más Mujer project. So she will talk online.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yes. You go ahead, please.
Just okay. Perfect. So, are you sharing my presentation?
Yes. We are seeing your presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, good afternoon and good morning to everyone. Thank you very much to UNECE for the invitation. Well, my name is Maria Francisca Valenzuela. I'm Chief of Gender Equality and Human Rights Office of the Ministry of Energy in Chile. And I'm very pleased to share with you today our experience, specifically our initiative with private sector in the energy industries. The next slide, please. I don't know. Thank you very much. So first of all, when we talk about positioning a gender equality agenda from public sector, it's very important to research the context and have evidence and data collection about the sector do you want to work with. So the first step was develop an inform of statistics about women participation in energy. And the evidence was very clear about the problem. So as you can see, we only have 23% of participation of women in the sector, only 70% of women in high management positions, 24% of average wage gap between men and women. And well, this is very interesting point because most of women are in administrative positions in energy, 57%. So in the next slide, you can see our other interesting information we're collecting in the human capital studies. So as you can see in electrical transmission and distribution, we only have 20% of women and coal and heat technologies. We have 12.8% of women and electrical generation. We have only 8% of women. So in according to improve women participation in energy, we have important goals to year 2030. As you can see, 18 qualifications and 18,000 qualifications and 9,000 certifications for the year 2030, and specifically with 30% of women, 10% of indigenous peoples, and 10% related with directly or indirectly with fair transition. So we have a specific quota that we inform to the educational institutions that we're working to. And next slide, please. So about our plan with private sector, is more women in energy. In Spanish is Plan Energía Más Mujeres for a more diverse and inclusive fair transition. So the program has 10 axes, 14 measures, and 40 specific actions for achieve gender equality and sustainable inclusion of women in the development of energy industries and their ecosystems. The participation in the program for companies is absolutely voluntary, and this experience is inspired in an Australian model from the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, but in our case, it's very specific in energy industries. So from 2023, we have 100 companies and trade associations in Energía Más Mujeres plan. And if you're wondering about how we work only with a voluntary commitment from private sector, I think I would like to highlight 3 important aspects. First, provide context and evidence in constant dialogue with the companies and trade associations, which means notify about the data collection in the sector and what achievements are related to, in this case, gender equality. So second, create a public-private effort like a community to share the best practices and commit from the highest level. A very good example is where we share the improvements to every company and trade associations in a book every year. So third, provide guidelines, goals, and concrete examples about how they can achieve the gender equality in their institutions. The next slide, please. So as you can see, a very good example about what I've just said is our axis of work. We have 10 different axes. The first one is a commitment from the highest level, CEO, head office, committed with gender equality. Second is related with training in energy for women. We need more women with specializations in careers related with energy. Third, improve the women participation in different labor sectors in energy. The fourth is related with leadership and increase the participation of women as decision makers in energy. 5 is reduce the wage gap between men and women. 6, in Latin America, women dedicate 3 times more time to unpaid domestic work and childcare in comparison to men. So create campaigns and policies about co-responsibility is very, very necessary. 7 is about create, for example, a protocol against gender-based violence. The 8, for example, is about create a policy about gender equality. What is our pathway for achieve that? We need a policy. We need our ship, you know. And the 9, if they're interesting, you create, for example, specific initiatives for women in their social responsibility areas. And 10 is the participation of women as a providers of products and services for companies related with energy. So the next one, please, is from this year in Energía Más Mujeres, we are working in a focalization strategy related to women's economic empowerment. So we're working with UN Women and their technical assistant, and 4 times per year, we have workshops with private sector to support their efforts with guidelines and tools that they can use for achieve what are we asking for. So also it's very important to highlight the benefits about gender equality to the companies. For example, the productivity is better when you include women. And when we have more and different perspectives and talents, it is proven that we have better solutions. So, and this year we're working about move towards gender equality leadership and management positions in the energy industry, improvements in reducing the wage gap by strata, implement strategies to promote incorporation of women in diverse work fields in the energy industry, implementation of a gender action plan. It's like a policy. So access of interesting for sustainable incorporation of women in the energy sector is very important to talk about prevention and eradication of gender-based violence, and also the conciliation of work life and family life. This is co-responsibility as well. So just very quickly and finish the next slide, please. I would like to share very quickly our most recent work in green hydrogen. From March, we're working with different ministries of the Chilean government to create our gender mainstream in green hydrogen strategy. So we're proposing different actions related to each axis of the national green hydrogen plan. So this is happening right now. So I hope in the next months, could share the final product, but this is a very, very interesting experience for us. And we are related every action with the axis of the national plan, for example, sustainability and local value, infrastructure and investment as well. So this is happening right now, and probably at the end of the year, we can share our experience and how gender mainstream in green hydrogen is present in the experience of Chile. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria Francisca. Do we have any question from the floor? I have one question from Kanindra that asks, India has 20% reserved seats in institutions of higher education. Do you have such preparation agenda for women workforce for industry? He's not there?
Yes, yes. No, yes, absolutely. Specifically in our human capital area, we have a specific quota of 30% of women in every certification and training. What are we doing from the Ministry of Energy? And also we are working with a lot of educational institutions to promote more gender equality, to promote inclusion of women in careers that are related with the energy sector. So yes, we have measures, we have goals about it, and we need to wait as well because these changes need time. And well, we hope to until 2030 have at least 5,000 women trained by the Ministry of Energy in the energy sector.
Okay, thank you. May I add some an advice. Maybe you could connect with other related institutions around the world. A lot is going on. Women on nitrogen, women on UNEP, women on the World Energy Council, and that would enhance the results by sharing experiences. And thank you very much for your presentation.